time, question and answer. And so, somebody got a question up here. Who, Max?
Yes. So when I was reading the workbook, I was in there and you were talking about how you rehearse is how you're actually going to perform on the show, and I don't understand really why or how. Or
Okay.
what's that mean?
Yeah, because that's a really important principle in this for you to understand the connection between rehearsal and performing. So, I mean, if you look down and pace back and forth and repeat the words a lot until you memorize them in an internal dialogue, well, you're going to go and you're going to do a show where you're pacing back and forth and looking down to remember the words and saying them, and you'll have no relationship, no connection to the audience whatsoever, right? It's just all about, because you haven't practiced that, okay? And so the way you practice at home becomes really important, because it really sets, you know, it really sets up your mind and the state of mind that you're in to perform. So if you're doing something that kind of locks you away from the audience, then that's how you're going to go ahead and perform your show. Here's an example. I had one guy in the class years ago. I called this the milkman effect. Every week he'd come in swearing that he'd worked on his show, right? And he'd get up and he just couldn't remember it. And I, you know, of course I make him look at everybody and so on and so forth. And, you know, and each week he just struggled. You know, finally one week I went, okay, how are you rehearsing? And he said, oh, I'm a milkman. And when I drive around in my truck, I rehearse my show. So I sat him on a stool and made him sit there and go like this, right? You know, pretend you're driving your truck. All right. Yeah. And he went through his show perfectly. Because it's not just brain, it's body. It's body memory as much as it is brain-mind work. So as soon as his body was moving in position like he was doing when he was, his access came back. They also found that that's true with college students. If they studied on some drug, they had to then take the test on that drug. If you study on Adderall, you have to take the test on Adderall, because your mind is in a different state. Because if you do it with the drug, and then, so I'm going to go in now clean and do the test, you won't remember most of the stuff because it's coded in the part of your brain that's kind of then been working on the Adderall. Or in my days, it was Benzedrine. We did Bennies back in college. So it's the same effect, and there's research behind this, not just Greg sitting there talking about this, you know. And so now, conversely, if you get up and you know and pretend there's an audience at least, you know, pretend there's people out there and you're talking to them, you're practicing that. Okay, I know you'll end up being like Rupert Pupkin in The King of Comedy. It's a Martin Scorsese film. You should really see it if you haven't, with Jerry Lewis playing a pretty much dramatic role. And he was brilliant. But he put a big audience on his wall and he practiced his stand-up comedy talking to the wall. But at least there's people there to talk to. That's one thing, is to have a pretend audience. The other thing is to do my rehearsal process, so everything you talk about, you get up and act out a scene for it so that there's a picture, and then you can look at the picture and that reminds you of what to say and how to communicate with people. So the whole time, if you're doing it the way that I want you to do it, which is from picture, sounds, and feelings, getting up and rehearsing, so everything is sensory memory rather than internal dialogue memory. If you work that way, your body language, vocal tone, all your communication, and your relationship, the audience can all be there, okay? You don't have to force the emotions or anything else. And that's what I'm after, so that, and then still get up when you do your show and pretend you're doing it for an audience and that you're talking to people, because that brings up the states. So that in particular, that's what I'm talking about, is you gotta spend, it's one of the most, I think, most neglected areas of stand-up comedy, is the preparation of how you get on stage, and what is what is bad technique, which is word memorization in internal dialogue and looking down, and what is good memorization is practicing being in the states that you want to be in and having the emotions that you would have for that, you see, and having the pictures. So all the time you're performing, you're telling a story, okay? And that's the outcome that I want is when you get up there, it's just like you've been telling stories your whole life, remembering from sensory information and sharing sharing a story, reacting to it with your own authentic personality.